The disciplinary hearing was supposed to be routine. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention in the sterile conference room at Camp Meridian, her pristine dress uniform displaying ribbons that told the story of 8 years of exemplary service. Around the mahogany table sat 5 officers, their faces stone cold as they reviewed the charges that would end her military career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Insubordination, failure to follow direct orders, conduct unbecoming of a non-commissioned officer. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. These are serious allegations, Sergeant Vasquez. Elena kept her eyes fixed on the American flag hanging behind the panel, her jaw set in quiet defiance. She knew what was coming. In 10 minutes, they would strip her of her rank, her uniform, and her dignity. What they didn't know was that beneath the fabric of military regulation lay a truth that would shake the very foundations of Camp Meridian. The tattoo on her back held secrets that could save lives or destroy careers. And when General Patricia Blackwood arrived unexpectedly at the hearing, everything Elena had fought to keep hidden would be exposed in the most dramatic way possible. Elena Vasquez had arrived at Camp Meridian 3 months earlier, with a reputation that preceded her like morning mist over the California hills. The base, known for its cutting-edge cyber warfare training program, buzzed with rumors about the transfer from Fort Braxton. Some said she was a troublemaker. Others whispered she had connections in high places. The truth, as Elena well knew, was far more complicated. The transport van dropped her at the main gate on a Tuesday morning in March, her single duffel bag containing everything she owned. Unlike the other personnel arriving for the Advanced Cyber Operations course, Elena carried no laptops, no high-tech gadgets, no external hard drives filled with coding portfolios. Instead, tucked carefully in her bag was a worn leather journal filled with hand-drawn network diagrams and vulnerability assessments, written in her precise handwriting. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen was the first to notice her unconventional approach. As the acknowledged star of the cyber program, Marcus commanded respect with his lightning-fast keyboard skills and ability to penetrate supposedly secure networks in record time. His workstation was a monument to modern warfare technology: 3 monitors, custom mechanical keyboard, and processing power that could crack most encryption in minutes. "Check out the new girl," Marcus announced to his cluster of admirers as Elena set up her assigned workstation. "Looks like someone got lost on the way to the supply depot." Elena's setup was sparse by comparison. A standard issue laptop, a basic notebook, and a collection of pens that looked like they'd seen better days. She ignored the snickers from Marcus's group as she methodically arranged her workspace, each item placed with deliberate precision. The Advanced Cyber Operations course was designed to identify and train the military's next generation of digital warriors. Students learn to exploit vulnerabilities in enemy systems, defend critical infrastructure from attack, and conduct sophisticated psychological operations through electronic means. The program's philosophy was built around one core principle: speed of execution determines success in cyberspace. Major Patricia Kane, the course director, embodied this philosophy completely. A former NSA operative with a reputation for aggressive tactics, she had transformed the program into a high-pressure environment where students competed to achieve the fastest hack times and most creative exploits. Her morning briefings always emphasized the same theme. "In cyber warfare, hesitation equals death," Major Kane would say, pacing before the assembled students. "While you're analyzing network architecture, the enemy is stealing state secrets. While you're documenting vulnerabilities, they're launching attacks on critical infrastructure. Speed isn't just preferred here. It's the only thing that matters." Elena absorbed these lectures with quiet skepticism. During her years at Fort Braxton, she had learned a different approach to cybersecurity. Her mentor, Chief Warrant Officer. Rebecca Torres had taught her that understanding systems deeply was more valuable than exploiting them quickly. While other analysts rushed to find surface-level vulnerabilities, Elena had developed techniques for identifying fundamental architectural weaknesses that could compromise entire networks. The first practical exercise revealed the gulf between Elena's methods and the program's expectations. Students were given 60 minutes to penetrate a simulated enemy network and extract classified documents. The faster they completed the task, the higher their score. Marcus Chen finished in 18 minutes, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he deployed automated scanning tools and pre-written exploit scripts. The classroom erupted in applause as his success was announced. Other top performers completed the exercise in similar timeframes, each using variations of the rapid attack methodology the program promoted. Elena took a different approach entirely. Instead of immediately attempting to breach the network, she spent the first 30 minutes carefully mapping the system architecture, identifying not just entry points, but understanding how the network components interconnected. Her journal filled with detailed diagrams showing data flows, authentication mechanisms, and potential cascade failure points. When she finally began her attack, it was surgical in its precision. Rather than using brute force techniques, Elena exploited a subtle timing vulnerability in the network's authentication protocol that would give her persistent access even after the initial breach was discovered. Her method was elegant, nearly undetectable, and would allow for long-term intelligence gathering rather than simple smash-and-grab data theft. But when the 60-minute timer expired, Elena was still documenting her findings. She had successfully penetrated the network and identified vulnerabilities that none of the other students had found, but she hadn't completed the specific data extraction task within the time limit. Major Kane reviewed the results with obvious disappointment. "Vasquez," she announced to the class, "your analysis shows technical competence, but you failed to complete the assigned mission. In real combat, the enemy doesn't wait for you to finish your documentation." The message was clear. Elena's thorough approach, while technically superior, didn't align with the program's values. Marcus Chun received the highest marks for his rapid completion, while Elena's deeper insights were dismissed as academic exercise. The social dynamics of the program quickly reflected this academic hierarchy. Marcus became the unofficial leader of the top-performing students, a group that dubbed themselves the Speed Demons for their ability to rapidly complete cyber exercises. They gathered each evening in the base recreation center, comparing their latest hack times and developing increasingly sophisticated automated tools. Elena found herself increasingly isolated from these groups. Her methodical approach and detailed documentation earned her the nickname Professor, not meant as a compliment. When she tried to share insights about long-term network persistence or architectural vulnerabilities, other students would interrupt with comments about overthinking simple problems or paralysis by analysis. The breaking point came during a collaborative exercise designed to simulate a real cyber warfare scenario. Students were divided into teams tasked with defending a mock power grid control system while simultaneously attacking their opponents' networks. The exercise was designed to last 6 hours, with teams scored on both their defensive effectiveness and offensive success. Elena was assigned to Team Charlie, led by Marcus Chen. Their strategy session revealed the fundamental disconnect between her approach and the team's methodology. "We hit them fast and hard in the first hour," Marcus explained, pointing to his attack timeline. "Automated scans, exploit deployment, maximum damage before they can react. Defense is secondary. Best defense is a good offense." Elena raised her hand tentatively. "What about persistent access? If we focus on speed, we might miss opportunities for long-term intelligence gathering. And our defensive strategy should account for the architectural vulnerabilities I've identified in the control system." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Professor, This isn't a research project. We need results, not theories. Just follow the plan and try to keep up." The exercise unfolded exactly as Elena had feared. Team Charlie's rapid-fire attacks achieved initial success, quickly compromising several of their opponent's systems. But their focus on speed had left critical vulnerabilities in their own defenses, and their attacks were easily detected and countered once the element of surprise was lost. Meanwhile, Elena noticed that the opposing team was using exactly the kind of persistent access techniques she had tried to suggest. They were quietly establishing backdoors and gathering intelligence, while Team Charlie celebrated their flashy, but ultimately temporary victories. "They're inside our core systems," Elena warned Marcus during the third hour of the exercise. "Their attack pattern suggests they've been mapping our architecture since the beginning." Marcus barely looked up from his keyboard. "Impossible. Our intrusion detection would have caught that." 5 minutes later, Team Charlie's entire network went dark. Their opponents had triggered a cascade failure that shut down every system simultaneously. The exercise ended with Team Charlie in last place, their rapid early success meaningless in the face of a sophisticated long-term strategy. In the post-exercise debrief, Major Kane was brutal in her assessment. Team Charlie showed excellent initial aggression, but failed to maintain tactical awareness. In real warfare, this kind of defensive failure would result in catastrophic infrastructure damage. Elena knew her analysis of the opponent's strategy had been correct, but she also knew that speaking up would only reinforce her reputation as someone who focused on problems rather than solutions. She remained silent as Marcus deflected blame onto equipment failures and unrealistic exercise parameters. That evening, as Elena sat alone in her barracks room reviewing her notes from the exercise, she received an unexpected visitor, Sergeant First Class David Kim, one of the few students who hadn't aligned himself with either the Speed Demons or the other established cliques, knocked on her door. "Mind if I come in?" David asked. "I wanted to talk about today's exercise." Elena gestured to the chair beside her desk. David was older than most of the other students, a former infantry soldier who had transitioned to cyber operations after an injury ended his combat career. His approach was more measured than Marcus's crowd, but he had still been successful within the program's framework. "You called the attack pattern perfectly," David said without preamble. "I was watching their network traffic, and you identified their persistent access methods hours before they executed the final attack." Elena looked up from her journal. "It doesn't matter what I identified if I couldn't convince the team to act on it." David nodded thoughtfully. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "That's what I wanted to talk about. I've been watching how you approach these problems, and your methodology is completely different from what they're teaching here. Where did you learn to analyze systems like that?" For the first time since arriving at Camp Meridian, Elena found herself explaining her background honestly. She told David about her mentor at Fort Braxton, about the years she had spent studying not just how to break into systems, but how to understand them at a fundamental level. She described techniques for identifying architectural weaknesses that took time to develop but provided far more valuable intelligence than rapid surface exploits. "Chief Torres taught me that the most dangerous vulnerabilities are the ones that aren't obvious," Elena explained. "Anyone can find a misconfigured firewall or an unpatched server. But understanding how an entire network is designed, identifying the critical nodes and failure points, that takes patience and deep analysis." David listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he understood the implications of Elena's approach. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You realize you're fighting an uphill battle here," he finally said. "Major Kane built this program around speed and immediate results. The metrics, the grading system, even the equipment allocation. Everything favors rapid execution over thorough analysis. Elena nodded. I'm starting to understand that. The question is, what are you going to do about it? You can try to adapt to their system, or you can keep doing what you know is right and accept the consequences. It was a choice Elena had been avoiding, but David's direct question forced her to confront the reality of her situation. She could compromise her principles and try to succeed within the program's framework, or she could maintain her approach and accept that it would likely end her military career. I became a soldier to serve my country, Elena said finally. If I compromise the skills that make me effective just to fit in, what kind of service is that? David smiled for the first time since entering her room. That's what I hoped you'd say. For what it's worth, I think you're right about these systems. The question is whether you'll get the chance to prove it. After David left, Elena sat alone with her journal, writing detailed observations about the day's exercise and the patterns she had observed. She was beginning to understand that her conflict with the program wasn't just about different methodologies. It was about fundamentally different philosophies of what made an effective cyber warrior. The program valued speed, aggression, and immediate results. Elena valued thoroughness, precision, and long-term strategic thinking. Both approaches had merit, but only one was being recognized and rewarded at Camp Meridian. As she closed her journal and prepared for sleep, Elena made a decision that would ultimately determine the course of everything that followed. She would not compromise her principles or abandon the methods that she knew were effective. If that meant failing the program, so be it. But she would not pretend that speed was more important than being right when lives and national security were at stake. What Elena didn't know was that her commitment to this principle would soon be tested in ways she couldn't imagine, and that the tattoo hidden beneath her uniform would become the key to proving that sometimes the most important victories come to those who are willing to be different, even when being different means standing alone. The morning of the final comprehensive examination arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to mirror the tension crackling through the Cyber Operations Center. Elena stood before her assigned workstation, watching as her fellow students made last-minute adjustments to their automated scanning tools and exploit libraries. The test would determine who graduated from the Advanced Cyber Operations course and who would be reassigned to less prestigious positions within military intelligence. Major Kane's voice echoed through the sterile room as she outlined the parameters. You have 4 hours to completely compromise the Redstone network, extract all classified materials, and document your methodology. This simulation represents a real-world enemy system protecting nuclear facility schematics. Failure to complete. The mission within the time limit represents failure to protect American lives. Elena felt the familiar weight of expectation and doubt settling on her shoulders. Around her, students like Marcus Chen were already preparing their rapid-fire attack sequences, fingers hovering over keyboards loaded with pre-written scripts, designed to overwhelm network defenses through sheer volume and speed. The Redstone network was the most sophisticated simulation the program had ever deployed. Designed by former NSA specialists, it incorporated multiple layers of security, decoy systems, and adaptive countermeasures that would respond to different types of attacks. Intelligence suggested that the real enemy systems it was modeled after had never been successfully penetrated by conventional means. As the starting signal echoed through the room, Elena watched her classmates launch into immediate action. Marcus's team began deploying massive port scans and vulnerability assessments, their screens filling with scrolling data as automated tools probed every accessible entry point. Other students followed similar approaches, trusting in overwhelming firepower to eventually break through the network's defenses. Elena remained motionless for the first 15 minutes, her notebook open beside her keyboard, but her pen still capped. While chaos erupted around her, she was doing something none of the other students had considered. She was thinking. The Redstone network wasn't just a collection of servers and firewalls. It was a complete digital ecosystem designed to protect information that could literally determine the fate of nations. The people who built it hadn't just installed security measures. They had created a comprehensive defense strategy based on understanding how attackers think and operate. Elena began her approach not with scanning tools, but with research. Using only passive reconnaissance techniques, she spent the first hour mapping the network's publicly visible infrastructure. Instead of trying to find entry points, she was studying the architecture itself, looking for patterns that would reveal the designer's security philosophy. What she discovered confirmed her suspicions. The Redstone network had been designed specifically to defeat the kind of rapid, aggressive attacks that the cyber program emphasized. Every obvious vulnerability was a trap, every apparent weakness was bait designed to lure attackers into carefully prepared kill zones where their activities would be detected and their access terminated. While Marcus and his followers triggered one defensive response after another, burning through their attack vectors with no sustainable progress, Elena was identifying the network's actual weak points. The real vulnerabilities weren't in the security software or firewall configurations. They were in the human processes and communication protocols that the network's operators used to manage the system. 2 hours into the examination, the scoreboard showed Marcus in the lead with several successful penetrations of outer defense layers. Other top students had achieved similar progress, each celebrating their ability to bypass initial security measures. Elena's name appeared at the bottom of the rankings with 0 successful intrusions recorded. "Looks like the professor is struggling with the real world," Marcus announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "Maybe she should stick to theoretical analysis." Elena didn't respond. She was too focused on a pattern she had discovered in the network's administrative traffic. The Redstone network's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. It was designed to adapt to attacks in real time, learning from each attempt and adjusting its defenses accordingly. But that adaptive capability required constant communication between the various security systems, and communication meant protocol vulnerabilities that a patient analyst could exploit. Instead of attacking the network directly, Elena began crafting a sophisticated social engineering attack that would target the simulated network administrators. She created carefully crafted emails that appeared to come from legitimate security vendors containing reports about new vulnerabilities that required immediate attention. The emails included links to fake security patches that were actually reconnaissance tools designed to gather intelligence about the network's internal structure. The approach required patience and precision. Each email had to be perfectly crafted. To avoid suspicion, each fake security report had to contain enough legitimate technical information to pass initial scrutiny. While her classmates were trying to break down the front door, Elena was convincing the network's guardians to invite her inside. 3 hours into the examination, the scoreboard told a troubling story. Marcus had achieved the deepest penetration of any student, successfully compromising several critical systems and beginning the process of locating classified materials. Other top performers had made significant progress, each demonstrating the rapid execution skills that the program valued most highly. Elena's official score remained unchanged, 0 successful intrusions. From the perspective of the grading system, she had accomplished nothing in 3 hours of work. What the scoreboard couldn't measure was the comprehensive intelligence network she had quietly established throughout the Redstone system. Her social engineering attack had succeeded beyond her most optimistic projections. The fake security alerts had not only been accepted by the simulated administrators, but had been forwarded throughout the network's security team. Elena now had detailed information about the network's internal architecture, administrative procedures, and the personal communication patterns of the people responsible for protecting the system. More importantly, She had identified something that none of the other students had even considered. The Redstone network contained a hidden failsafe system designed to completely purge all data if it detected certain types of aggressive attacks. Marcus and the other rapid attackers were unknowingly triggering security protocols that would ultimately make their missions impossible to complete. With 30 minutes remaining in the examination, Elena finally began her actual attack on the Redstone network. But instead of trying to penetrate the primary security systems, she used her intelligence about the administrative procedures to request a routine system maintenance window. Her carefully forged credentials and comprehensive knowledge of the network's operational procedures convinced the simulated administrators to grant her temporary, elevated access for what appeared to be legitimate security updates. Once inside the system with administrative privileges, Elena's task became almost trivial. She didn't need to crack encryption or bypass firewalls because she had legitimate access to everything she needed. Within 15 minutes, she had located and copied all of the classified materials that the other students had been struggling to find for hours. But Elena's approach had an additional advantage that she hadn't initially intended. Because her access was authorized and her activities appeared to be routine maintenance, the network's defensive systems never triggered the fail-safe protocols that would have detected and stopped more aggressive attacks. As the examination timer reached 0, the room fell silent except for the clicking of keyboards as students rushed to complete their documentation. The scoreboard showed Marcus with significant progress, but incomplete data extraction. Most other students had achieved partial success, penetrating some systems but failing to locate the most critical classified materials. Elena sat calmly at her workstation, her mission completed with 5 minutes to spare. She had successfully extracted every piece of classified information from the Redstone network, mapped its entire security architecture, and maintained persistent access that would allow for ongoing intelligence gathering. Her approach had been so subtle that the network's defensive systems had never realized they were under attack. Major Kane began reviewing the results with her characteristic efficiency, calling out student names and announcing their scores. Marcus received praise for his aggressive tactics and rapid initial progress, though his failure to complete the data extraction was noted as a significant shortcoming. When Major Kane reached Elena's name, she paused, her expression shifting from routine announcement to visible confusion. She consulted her tablet several times before speaking. "Vasquez," she said slowly, "your official intrusion score shows 0 successful penetrations of primary security systems." Elena stood at attention, knowing what was coming next. However, Major Kane continued, her voice betraying her puzzlement. "You appear to have successfully extracted 100% of the classified materials from the target network, including several files that other students were unable to locate." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Marcus turned in his chair to stare at Elena, his expression shifting from smugness to bewilderment. Major Kane consulted her notes again. "Your methodology report indicates that you achieved this through social engineering and administrative access rather than direct network penetration. While technically successful, this approach fails to demonstrate the aggressive cyber warfare capabilities that this program is designed to develop." Elena felt the familiar sting of having her success dismissed because it didn't fit the expected framework. "Ma'am, in real-world operations, wouldn't the objective be to successfully complete the mission rather than to demonstrate specific techniques?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Major Kane's expression hardened as she recognized the implicit criticism of the program's priorities. "Sergeant Vasquez, this program trains cyber warriors, not administrators. Your approach, while clever, represents exactly the kind of overthinking and hesitation that gets people killed in real combat situations. An enemy network won't grant you administrative access just because you ask politely." Marcus seized the opportunity to reinforce his position as the program's exemplar. "Exactly right, ma'am. The professor's method might work in a classroom, but real cyber warfare requires aggression and speed. You can't social engineer your way through a live combat operation. Elena felt the judgment of the room settling around her like a heavy blanket. Her complete success in the mission was being reframed as a failure because she had achieved it through methods that didn't align with the program's philosophy. "Ma'am," Elena said carefully, "may I ask what happened to the students? Who triggered the network's fail-safe protocols during their attacks?" Major Kane's eyes narrowed. "What fail-safe protocols?" Elena pulled out her notebook and turned to a page covered with detailed technical diagrams. The Redstone network includes an automatic data purge system that activates when it detects certain attack signatures. Students using aggressive scanning techniques and rapid exploitation tools would have triggered this system, making it impossible to complete the data extraction mission regardless of their technical skills. The silence that followed was profound. Major Kane consulted her tablet with increasing agitation before calling over one of the technical supervisors. After a whispered conference, she returned to address the class. "There appears to have been a technical malfunction in the simulation," she announced, her voice carefully controlled. "Some students' activities may have triggered unintended defensive responses." Elena realized that the technical supervisors had designed the simulation to be more realistic than the instructional staff had understood. The failsafe system wasn't a malfunction. It was a feature that demonstrated exactly why aggressive cyber attacks often failed in real-world scenarios. But rather than acknowledging this lesson, the program's leadership was choosing to dismiss it as a technical error. Elena's success, achieved by understanding and working within the system's actual parameters, was being relegated to a footnote, while Marcus's aggressive, but ultimately failed approach was still being praised for its demonstration of proper cyber warrior mentality. The final rankings were announced an hour later. Marcus Chun graduated at the top of the class, his rapid initial progress and aggressive methodology earning him the highest marks despite his failure to complete the primary mission. Elena finished in the bottom third, her perfect mission completion, overshadowed by her failure to demonstrate the quick strike capabilities that the program valued. That evening, Elena received the formal notification that had become inevitable. She was being transferred out of the Advanced Cyber Operations course and reassigned to the base's Information Systems Support Division. The language was diplomatically neutral, but the message was clear. Her approach didn't fit the military's needs for cyber warfare specialists. As Elena packed her belongings in her barracks room, she reflected on the irony of her situation. She had succeeded completely where others had failed, but her success was meaningless because it had been achieved through methods that challenged the program's fundamental assumptions about effective cyber warfare. The transfer orders specified that she would be working under Chief Warrant Officer Angela Santos in the base's Network Administration Department. It was a significant demotion in prestige, removing her from the elite cyber warrior track and placing her in a support role that most ambitious soldiers viewed as a career dead end. David Kim stopped by her room as she was finishing her packing. His expression mixed sympathy with frustration as he watched her fold her uniforms into standard-issue cardboard boxes. "This is insane," he said without preamble. "You accomplished the mission perfectly. How can they justify transferring you out of the program?" Elena shrugged, trying to maintain the appearance of acceptance even though disappointment burned in her chest. "I failed to demonstrate the required capabilities. The mission's success was achieved through methods that don't align with program objectives." David sat heavily in the chair beside her desk. "Do you want to know what's really insane? Marcus is being fast-tracked for advanced training at the Cyber Command headquarters. He's going to be responsible for protecting critical infrastructure, and he doesn't even understand why his attack methods failed in today's simulation." Elena paused in her packing. "What do you mean?" "I was monitoring the network traffic. During the examination, Marcus and the others triggered the failsafe system multiple times, but they never realized it was happening. They thought their access was being blocked by sophisticated defensive measures, not by their own aggressive techniques causing the system to protect itself. Elena had suspected as much, but hearing David confirm it made the situation even more frustrating. The students who were being promoted to advanced positions didn't understand the systems they would be responsible for protecting. Their success in the program was based on metrics that bore little relationship to actual effectiveness in complex cyber operations. The worst part, David continued, is that your approach is exactly what's needed for real-world operations. Understanding systems deeply, working within their parameters, achieving objectives without triggering defensive responses. That's how actual intelligence operations work. Elena appreciated David's support, but she had already accepted the reality of her situation. The program has its priorities, and I don't fit them. Maybe I'll be more useful in network administration. David shook his head. You're too good for this, Elena. Your skills are exactly what the military needs, even if this program doesn't recognize it. After David left, Elena finished her packing in solitude. As she sealed the last box, she caught sight of her reflection in the small mirror mounted beside her desk. The woman looking back at her appeared calm and composed, but Elena could see the disappointment and determination warring in her own eyes. Tomorrow she would report to Chief Santos and begin a new chapter in what had become an increasingly unconventional military career. She had no way of knowing that her transfer to network administration would provide her with access to information and systems that would soon prove more valuable than any advanced cyber warfare training. The tattoo on her back, hidden beneath layers of regulation uniform fabric, was a reminder of lessons learned in previous assignments and challenges overcome through perseverance rather than recognition. Soon, that tattoo would become the key to proving that sometimes the most important victories come to those who understand systems well enough to protect them, rather than those who only know how to attack them. But first, Elena had to survive. Being relegated to the margins of a military establishment that had decided her methods were too slow, too careful, and too different to matter. She had no way of knowing that her exile would soon become the most important position on the entire base. The Information Systems Support Division occupied the basement level of Building C, a concrete fortress that housed Camp Meridian's most critical but least glamorous operations. Elena descended the fluorescent-lit stairway on her first morning, carrying a box of personal items and the subdued resignation that came with professional exile. The cyber warriors above might dream of digital glory, but down here was where the base's actual functionality lived and breathed through fiber optic cables and server farms. Chief Warrant Officer Angela Santos was waiting in the main operations center, her weathered face displaying the kind of patience that came from 2 decades of managing systems that everyone else took for granted. Unlike the sleek cyber warfare facilities upstairs, this domain was purely functional. Rows of monitoring stations, walls lined with network diagrams, and the constant hum of cooling systems maintaining the servers that kept Camp Meridian operational. So you're the washout from Kane's cyber program, Santos said without malice, her voice carrying more curiosity than judgment. I've heard interesting things about your methodology. Elena set down her box beside an available workstation. I'm here to learn whatever you need me to know, Chief. Santos studied her for a moment, noting the careful neutrality in Elena's response. What I need you to know is that everything they taught you upstairs is incomplete. They're training digital soldiers to fight yesterday's wars, while tomorrow's threats are already inside our systems. The statement hung between them like a challenge and an invitation. Elena had expected routine network maintenance duties, mundane tasks designed to keep her busy while more important personnel handled critical operations. Instead, Santos was suggesting something far more complex and potentially dangerous: I don't understand, Chief. Santos gestured toward the wall of monitoring displays, each screen showing different aspects of Camp Meridian's network health. Look at those readouts and tell me what you see. Elena approached the displays, her analytical mind automatically beginning to process the streams of data. Network traffic patterns, authentication logs, system performance metrics, and security alerts flowed across the screens in real time. To most observers, it would appear as routine operational noise. But Elena's trained eye began identifying patterns that troubled her deeply. There are anomalies in the authentication patterns, she said slowly. Multiple failed login attempts from internal IP addresses, but the timing suggests automated probing rather than human error. Santos nodded approvingly. What else? Elena studied the displays more carefully, her concern growing as she identified additional irregularities. Data transfer volumes are elevated during off-peak hours, and there are encrypted communication channels that don't match any authorized protocols in the system documentation. Very good. Now tell me what Major Kane's cyber warriors would do if they identified these patterns. Elena considered the question, remembering the aggressive methodologies that had been drilled into every student in the program. They would immediately begin active countermeasures, deploy honeypots to trap the intruders, launch aggressive scans to identify compromised systems, and probably shut down affected network segments to prevent further infiltration. Santos smiled grimly. Exactly. And what would happen if they did that? The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. If the anomaly she was observing indicated a sophisticated adversary who had already established persistent access to Camp Meridian systems, aggressive countermeasures would likely trigger defensive responses from the attackers. They might accelerate their data collection, activate destructive payloads, or simply disappear deeper into the network where they would be even harder to detect and remove. They would alert the intruders that we know about the compromise, Elena said quietly. Any sophisticated adversary would respond by either accelerating their mission or going deeper underground. And if the adversary is already deeply embedded in our systems? Elena felt her blood run cold as she fully grasped what Santos was implying. They could have access to everything. Personnel records, operational plans, communication intercepts, even the cyber warfare program's training materials and methodologies. Santos walked to her private office and returned with a thick folder marked with security classifications that Elena hadn't seen since her intelligence training at Fort Braxton. I'm about to share information with you that could end both our careers if it's mishandled. The question is whether you're ready to understand what's really happening at Camp Meridian. Elena nodded, her analytical curiosity overriding any concerns about the potential consequences of deeper involvement. Santos opened the folder and spread several documents across the nearest workstation. 3 months ago, we began detecting irregularities in our network traffic. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger the automated security systems that Kane's people rely on. Just subtle patterns that suggested someone with intimate knowledge of our systems was moving through them with extraordinary care. The documents contained network analysis reports that Elena recognized as far more sophisticated than anything she had seen in the cyber warfare program. Instead of focusing on rapid intrusion detection and response, these reports demonstrated the kind of deep architectural analysis that Elena had been developing in her own work. Who prepared these analyses? Elena asked, noting the meticulous documentation and comprehensive system mapping that characterized the reports. I did, with help from a few trusted specialists who understand that sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones that don't announce themselves, Santos replied. The question we've been struggling with is how to investigate and counter a threat that has likely been studying our defensive capabilities for months. Elena examined the reports more carefully, her excitement growing as she recognized patterns and methodologies that aligned with her own approach to system analysis. These intrusions aren't random. Someone is conducting systematic intelligence, gathering, mapping our capabilities and procedures with enough patience to avoid detection by conventional security measures. Santos nodded. That's our assessment as well. But here's the problem. Every time we've tried to get the attention of Base Command or the cyber warfare program, we've been told that our concerns are theoretical and that we should focus on routine maintenance rather than threat analysis. Elena looked up from the documents, beginning to understand the true scope of the situation. They don't want to hear about threats that don't fit their response protocols. Exactly. Major Kane's program is designed around rapid detection and aggressive response. They're not equipped to handle adversaries who operate with patience and subtlety. More importantly, they're not interested in adapting their methods to address threats that challenge their fundamental assumptions about cyber warfare. Santos pulled out another set of documents, these marked with even higher security classifications. This is where things get complicated. We've managed to trace some of the intrusion patterns to their source, and what we found changes everything. Elena studied the new documents, her confusion growing as she tried to understand the technical details they contained. The intrusion analysis showed attack vectors and methodologies that seemed strangely familiar, but she couldn't immediately identify why they triggered recognition. These attack patterns, Elena said slowly, they're using social engineering techniques and administrative access exploitation, the same general approach I used in the final examination. Santos leaned back in her chair, her expression serious. That's not a coincidence. Someone has been studying the cyber warfare program's training materials and student performance data. They understand not just our defensive systems, but our offensive capabilities and training methodologies. The implications were staggering. If an adversary had access to the cyber warfare program's internal operations, they would know exactly how Camp Meridian's defenders would respond to different types of attacks. They could design intrusions specifically to avoid detection by the rapid response systems that Major Kane's program relied on. How long have you known about this? Elena asked. I've suspected for weeks, but I needed someone with the right analytical skills to help me prove it. Someone who understands both the technical aspects of advanced persistent threats and the institutional dynamics of military cyber operations. Elena realized that her transfer to the information systems support division hadn't been the career setback she had assumed. Santos had specifically requested her assignment, recognizing that Elena's comprehensive approach to system analysis was exactly what would be needed to investigate and counter a sophisticated adversary. What do you need me to do? Santos gestured toward a workstation that had been prepared with specialized monitoring and analysis tools. I need you to disappear into our network architecture and find out exactly how deep this compromise goes. But you'll need to do it without triggering any automated security systems or alerting anyone upstairs that we're conducting unauthorized investigation. Elena approached the workstation, noting that it had been configured with the kind of passive reconnaissance tools that she preferred over the aggressive scanning utilities that the cyber warfare program emphasized. This wasn't about rapid attack and response. This was about patient investigation and comprehensive understanding. Chief, if we discover that our systems have been comprehensively compromised, what's our plan for addressing it? Santos smiled grimly. That depends on what we find and who we can convince to listen. But Elena, I need you to understand something. The people responsible for this intrusion are sophisticated enough to have been studying our operations for months without detection. They know our procedures, our capabilities, and our limitations better than we know them ourselves. Elena began her investigation that afternoon, using techniques that she had developed through years of methodical system analysis. Instead of scanning for obvious signs of intrusion, she began mapping the normal patterns of network activity, looking for subtle deviations that might indicate unauthorized access. The work required patience and attention to detail that would have frustrated anyone trained in the rapid-fire methodologies of the cyber warfare program. Elena spent hours analyzing authentication logs, tracking data flows, and documenting communication patterns that most security professionals would have dismissed as routine operational noise. What she discovered over the following days painted a picture of intrusion so sophisticated and comprehensive that it challenged every assumption about network security that Camp Meridian's leadership held. The adversary hadn't simply penetrated specific systems. They had established persistent access throughout the base's entire digital infrastructure. More troubling still, the intrusion showed clear evidence of having been tailored specifically to avoid detection by the defensive systems and response protocols that Major Kane's program had implemented. Whoever was responsible understood Camp Meridian's cyber warfare capabilities well enough to design attacks that would be invisible to conventional security measures. Elena documented her findings with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized her work in the cyber warfare program. But instead of preparing reports for academic evaluation, she was building evidence of what might be the most significant security breach in Camp Meridian's history. The breakthrough came during her second week of investigation, when Elena identified a pattern in the intrusion data that made her blood run cold. The adversary wasn't just stealing information. They were subtly modifying training materials and assessment data within the cyber warfare program itself. Elena brought her findings to Santos immediately, her notebook filled with evidence that would revolutionize their understanding of the threat they were facing. "Chief, they're not just observing our operations," Elena said, spreading her analysis across Santos's desk. "They're influencing them. Someone has been making subtle modifications to the cyber warfare program's training scenarios and evaluation criteria." Santos studied the evidence, her expression growing increasingly grave as she understood the implications. "Show me exactly what they've changed." Elena pulled out detailed comparisons between the original training materials and the current versions being used in the cyber warfare program. The modifications were subtle, almost invisible to casual observation, but they consistently emphasized rapid attack methodologies over comprehensive analysis and defensive planning. "They're reinforcing the program's existing biases," Elena explained. "Every change pushes students further toward aggressive, rapid response techniques and away from the kind of thorough investigation that might detect sophisticated intrusions." Santos was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of Elena's discovery. "They're not just stealing our information. They're shaping our defensive capabilities to make sure we can't effectively counter their methods." Elena nodded. "It's the perfect attack. They've compromised our systems so thoroughly that they're actually influencing how we train the people who are supposed to protect us." The evidence Elena had assembled painted a picture of adversarial sophistication that went far beyond conventional cyber warfare. This wasn't just about stealing secrets or disrupting operations. It was about fundamentally undermining Camp Meridian's ability to defend itself by corrupting the very training that was supposed to produce effective cyber warriors. Santos closed the folder containing Elena's analysis and looked directly at her. "Elena, what I'm about to tell you could get us both court-martialed if we handle it wrong. But based on what you've discovered, I believe Camp Meridian is facing a threat that could compromise national security if we don't act." Elena waited, knowing that whatever Santos was about to reveal would change everything about her understanding of the situation. "I've been conducting this investigation without authorization from Base Command because I suspected that the compromise might extend into the leadership structure itself. If someone has been modifying training materials and assessment data, they would need access to systems and information that only senior personnel can reach." The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. Santos was suggesting that the sophisticated intrusion might have been facilitated by someone within Camp Meridian's own command structure. Someone with legitimate access to the most sensitive systems and information. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she realized that her analysis had uncovered evidence of what might be the most complex and dangerous security breach in military history. But she also knew that proving it and convincing anyone to act on it would require exactly the kind of patience, precision, and comprehensive understanding that had gotten her exiled from the cyber warfare program in the first place. "What do we do now, Chief?" Santos smiled grimly. "Now we figure out how to save this base from people who are supposed to be protecting it. And Elena, everything depends on being absolutely right when we make our move, because we'll only get one chance." The emergency alert pierced through Camp Meridian at 0347 hours on a Wednesday morning, jolting Elena from the restless sleep that had become her norm since beginning the unauthorized investigation. Red warning lights strobed through the barracks windows as the base-wide announcement crackled over the intercom system. "All personnel report to designated emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. Condition Red is now in effect." Elena dressed quickly in her duty uniform, her mind racing through the possibilities that could trigger such a drastic response. Condition Red hadn't been declared at Camp Meridian in over 5 years, reserved only for imminent threats to national security or direct attacks on military installations. The Information Systems Support Division's emergency station was located in the same basement facility where Elena had been conducting her investigation. But now the normally quiet operations center buzzed with frantic activity. Chief Santos was coordinating with multiple workstations simultaneously, her face illuminated by the glow of emergency displays showing critical system failures throughout the base. "Elena, thank God you're here," Santos called out as she spotted her approaching through the chaos. "We've got a catastrophic situation developing, and we need your analysis capabilities immediately." Elena approached Santos's command station, noting the cascade of error messages and security alerts flooding the primary displays. "What's happening, Chief?" At 0330 hours, someone initiated a coordinated attack on every critical system at Camp Meridian simultaneously. Santos explained, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Power grid management, communication networks, personnel databases, even the physical security systems controlling building access and perimeter defenses." Elena scanned the data displays, her analytical instincts already piecing together the pattern of system failures. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Chief, this isn't random," she said. "Someone with deep knowledge of our infrastructure is deliberately disabling our defenses." Santos gave a grim nod. "And it gets worse." The attack started just hours before General Patricia Blackwood was scheduled to conduct a surprise inspection of our cyber warfare program. She's on her way now with a full Pentagon delegation to evaluate whether Camp Meridian qualifies for expanded funding and strategic designation. Elena's thoughts raced. This wasn't coincidence. The attacker had inside knowledge not just of the base's systems, but of high-level operational schedules that should have been top secret. "Where's Major Kane's cyber team?" she asked. "That's the issue," Santos replied, pulling up a personnel map. When the attack hit, lockdown protocols sealed the cyber warfare center. Kane and her entire team are trapped inside with no comms and failing life support. Elena's stomach dropped. This attack wasn't just advanced, it was surgical. Whoever was behind it had deliberately neutralized Camp Meridian's primary cyber defenses, forcing base leadership into crisis mode. "Chief, this fits the exact scenario we warned about. Someone used our own protocols against us. Kane's team will be trying to fight back hard, which the attacker probably anticipated and is prepared to exploit." Santos was already accessing Elena's classified investigation logs. "We've got 2 hours before the general arrives. If the base is still offline by then, this won't just ruin careers, it could jeopardize national cyber defense strategy. We need to understand what's happening now." Elena rushed to her workstation, comparing the live attack data with everything she'd uncovered over recent weeks. What emerged was even more alarming than she feared. "Chief, they're using the exact vulnerabilities I flagged during my off-the-books investigation," she said. "Whoever's doing this has been watching me, using my findings to refine their attack." It was staggering. The attacker not only had full access to Camp Meridian systems, but had been tracking Elena's investigation in real time. Santos joined her at the terminal, eyes fixed on the data. "You're saying our investigation has been compromised from the start?" "Worse," Elena said. "I think it was manipulated. Someone wanted us to discover the breach, but only on their terms." She pulled up logs from the last few days, highlighting traffic she'd initially dismissed as routine. "Every time I made a key discovery, encrypted messages spiked from certain base terminals." Santos leaned in, her expression darkening. "Those terminals belonged to command-level personnel." It hit them both at once. The threat wasn't just external. Someone in Camp Meridian's leadership was involved. "We need to find the mole before General Blackwood arrives," Elena urged. She could be walking into a trap. Santos immediately began accessing personnel records and secure logs. "I'm giving you emergency clearance. Trace those encrypted messages fast." Elena dove into the surveillance data, her methodical style now fueled by urgency. If they didn't act quickly, the compromised officer might cover their tracks or worse. Finally, she saw the pattern. Each milestone in her investigation was followed by encrypted messages from one terminal in particular. "Chief, I've got the source," she said. "The messages are coming from Major Kane's personal terminal in the Cyber Warfare Center." Santos stared at the screen, stunned. Could Kane, the head of cyber defense, be the traitor? "Elena, that's not possible," she said. "Kane's sealed in the center with her team. There's no way she could be sending external comms right now." Elena opened the facility's schematics and security logs, racing to understand how it could be done. Unless she's not actually trapped. "Chief, what if the lockdown of the Cyber Warfare Center was part of the attack plan? What if Kane is using the sealed facility as cover for coordinating the assault on the base's systems?" The theory seemed almost too incredible to believe, but as Elena traced the evidence, it became clear that Major Kane's aggressive cyber warfare philosophy and her access to all aspects of Camp Meridian's defensive systems made her the perfect inside accomplice for a sophisticated adversary. "Chief, we need to get this information to Base Command immediately," Elena said. "If Kane is coordinating with external attackers, General Blackwood could be in serious danger when she arrives." Santos reached for the emergency communication system, but the display showed only static and error messages. "Elena, the attack has compromised our communication systems. We can't reach Base Command or warn General Blackwood through normal channels." Elena studied the system status displays, noting that while most of Camp Meridian's networks had been compromised, the Information Systems Support Division still maintained limited connectivity through hardened backup systems that weren't part of the main infrastructure. "Chief, I might be able to establish communication with General Blackwood's transport using the emergency backup protocols," Elena said. "But it would require manually accessing the base's primary communication array. And that's located in the same building as the compromised command center." Santos understood the implications immediately. Elena would have to physically infiltrate the most dangerous area of the base, potentially coming into direct contact with Major Kane or her external accomplices, in order to warn General Blackwood about the trap she was approaching. "Elena, that's an enormous risk. If Kane realizes that we've identified her as the source of the breach, she could take actions that would put the entire base in jeopardy." Elena was already preparing to leave the Information Systems Support Center, gathering the portable analysis equipment she would need to prove her case to General Blackwood. "Chief, General Blackwood is arriving in less than an hour. If we don't warn her, She and her entire Pentagon delegation could be walking into a situation designed to compromise national cyber defense strategy. Santos made a decision that would determine the fate of everyone involved. Elena, I'm authorizing you to take whatever actions are necessary to protect General Blackwood and preserve the integrity of this base. But you need to understand that if you're wrong about Kane, this will end both our careers and potentially our freedom. Elena paused at the door of the operations center, understanding the full weight of what she was about to attempt. Everything she had learned about patience, precision, and comprehensive analysis would be tested in the next hour under conditions that would challenge every assumption about effective cyber warfare. Chief, I've been wrong about a lot of things since I arrived at Camp Meridian, Elena said quietly. But I'm not wrong about this. Someone has been systematically undermining our defensive capabilities, and if we don't act now, the consequences will extend far beyond this base. Elena left the Information Systems Support Center and began making her way through Camp Meridian's darkened corridors toward the command building. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the hallways as she moved carefully past automated security systems that had been compromised by the ongoing attack. Her portable analysis equipment felt heavy in her backpack as she considered the evidence she would need to present to General Blackwood. The sophisticated patterns of intrusion, the correlation between her investigation and external communications, the timing of the attack to coincide with the general's visit, it all pointed to a level of coordination that could only be achieved with inside knowledge and access. But Elena also knew that accusations against a senior officer like Major Kane would require proof that went beyond circumstantial evidence and correlation analysis. She would need to demonstrate direct communication with external adversaries and specific actions that had facilitated the attack on Camp Meridian systems. As she approached the command building, Elena could see that the facility was still sealed under emergency lockdown protocols. But her years of experience with military systems had taught her that every security measure included backup procedures for exactly the kind of crisis situation that now engulfed Camp Meridian. Elena reached into her backpack and pulled out a device that Chief Santos had given her years earlier, a master access key that could override security protocols in genuine emergency situations. Using it would create a permanent record of her actions, but it would also allow her to access the communication system she needed to contact General Blackwood. She inserted the device into the building's security panel and watched as the massive steel doors slowly opened, revealing the darkened corridors of Camp Meridian's command center. Elena stepped inside, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether she could prevent a catastrophe or whether she was walking into a trap that had been carefully prepared for exactly this moment. The communication array was located on the building's top floor, requiring Elena to navigate through several levels of compromised security systems and potentially hostile personnel. As she began climbing the emergency stairwell, she could hear voices echoing from the cyber warfare center's sealed facility, voices that suggested Major Kane and her team were very much active despite the supposed system failures. Elena paused on the stairwell landing, listening carefully to the conversations filtering through the reinforced walls. What she heard confirmed her worst suspicions about the true nature of the crisis engulfing Camp Meridian. Blackwood's transport is 15 minutes out. Major Kane's voice carried clearly through the facility's compromised communication systems. Initiate final phase protocols and prepare to terminate all investigative personnel. Elena felt her blood run cold as she realized that the attack on Camp Meridian wasn't just about compromising cyber defense systems. It was about eliminating the people who had discovered the breach and ensuring that General Blackwood received information that would reshape national cyber warfare strategy according to the adversary's preferences. Elena continued climbing toward the communication array, knowing that she now had less than 15 minutes to contact General Blackwood and warn her about the trap that had been carefully constructed around her visit to Camp Meridian. Everything Elena had learned about precision, patience, and comprehensive analysis would be tested in the next few minutes under conditions that would challenge every assumption about what it meant to be a true cyber warrior. The tattoo on her back, hidden beneath her regulation uniform, was a reminder of previous battles fought and won through understanding rather than aggression. Soon, that tattoo would become the key to proving that sometimes the most important victories come to those who understand their enemies well enough to see the traps before they spring. Elena reached the communication array just as General Blackwood's transport helicopter appeared on the horizon, its distinctive silhouette cutting through the pre-dawn darkness over Camp Meridian. Her fingers flew across the emergency communication console, bypassing compromised security protocols with techniques that Chief Santos had taught her during countless late-night training sessions. The encrypted channel crackled to life just as Elena heard footsteps echoing in the stairwell below. Someone was coming, and she had perhaps 2 minutes to establish contact with General Blackwood before her location would be discovered. Blackhawk 7, this is Meridian Base Emergency Operations, Elena transmitted, using the authentication codes that Santos had provided. General Blackwood, you are approaching a compromised facility. Do not land. Repeat, do not land. The response came immediately, General Blackwood's voice sharp with authority and concern. Meridian Base, explain your situation. Our intelligence shows no current threats to this facility. Elena could hear the footsteps getting closer as she rapidly transmitted the critical information. General, Major Kane is coordinating with external adversaries. The Cyber Warfare Center lockdown is fabricated. They're planning to present you with compromised intelligence designed to reshape national cyber defense strategy. Who is this? Identify yourself immediately. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, Information Systems Support. General, I have comprehensive evidence of systematic intrusion and internal cooperation. Kane has been modifying training protocols and feeding intelligence to external contacts for months. The stairwell door burst open as Major Kane appeared with 2 of her cyber warfare specialists, their weapons drawn and expressions grim. Elena recognized the moment when everything she had worked for would either be vindicated or destroyed. Step away from that console, Vasquez, Kane commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. You're interfering with classified operations beyond your clearance level. Elena kept her hands on the communication console, maintaining the open channel with General Blackwood. General, Major Kane just entered the communication center with armed personnel. This confirms the threat assessment I just transmitted. Kane moved closer, her weapon trained on Elena. Vasquez, you have 30 seconds to end that transmission and surrender yourself for debriefing. You've stumbled into operational security matters that you cannot possibly understand. General Blackwood, Elena continued, ignoring Kane's threats. I'm transmitting data files that document the entire intrusion pattern. The evidence shows systematic modification of cyber warfare training materials and coordination with external intelligence services. Through the communication system, Elena could hear General Blackwood consulting with her advisors. Meridian Base, we're maintaining position until this situation is clarified. Major Kane, respond on this channel immediately. Kane's expression shifted from authority to barely controlled rage as she realized that her carefully constructed operation was unraveling. General Blackwood, this is Major Kane. Staff Sergeant Vasquez is suffering from stress-related psychological breakdown and is making unfounded accusations. The situation is under control. Elena knew this was her only opportunity to present the evidence that would either prove her case or end her military career permanently. General, I'm uploading the complete investigation files now. The data shows correlation between my investigation discoveries and encrypted communications from Kane's terminal to external contacts. As the data transmission began, Kane made a decision that revealed the true depth of her desperation. Instead of attempting to maintain her cover, she moved to forcibly terminate Elena's communication with General Blackwood. Vasquez, end that. Transmission now, or face immediate arrest for treason and violation of operational security. Elena turned to face Kane directly, her voice steady despite the weapon pointed at her. Major, the only treason here is your systematic betrayal of this base's security and the personnel who trusted you to protect them. The confrontation escalated when Kane attempted to physically remove Elena from the communication console. In the struggle that followed, Elena's uniform jacket was torn, revealing the intricate tattoo that covered her upper back and shoulders. The tattoo was a masterwork of military symbolism and personal history, depicting a complex scene that told the story of Elena's previous assignment with Army intelligence. At its center was the emblem of the 525th Military Intelligence Brigade, surrounded by coordinates and technical diagrams that represented specific operations Elena had conducted in classified overseas assignments. But it was the border of the tattoo that made General Blackwood's voice suddenly sharp with recognition when she saw it through the communication center's security cameras. Woven throughout the design were symbols and codes that only the highest levels of military intelligence would recognize, indicators that Elena Vasquez had been involved in the most sensitive cyber intelligence operations in recent military history. Major Kane, stand down immediately. General Blackwood's voice cut through the communication system with unmistakable authority. Sergeant Vasquez, are you Agent Phoenix? Elena felt the weight of her true identity settling around her like a familiar uniform. Agent Phoenix had been her operational designation during 3 years of deep cover work with Army intelligence, infiltrating foreign cyber warfare programs and documenting enemy capabilities. The tattoo was both a record of her service and a form of identification that only the highest levels of command would understand. Yes, General. Agent Phoenix, currently assigned to Camp Meridian under cover for investigation of suspected security breaches. Kane's weapon wavered as she began to understand that Elena wasn't Vasquez, was not the failed cyber warfare student she had appeared to be. The careful construction of Elena's apparent inadequacy, her transfer to information systems support, even her methodical approach that had seemed so out of place in the rapid-fire cyber program, it had all been an elaborate cover for one of the military's most experienced cyber intelligence operatives. General Blackwood, Elena continued, my assignment here was to investigate reports of systematic compromises in cyber warfare training programs. What I discovered is a coordinated effort to undermine our defensive capabilities by corrupting training methodologies and stealing operational intelligence. General Blackwood's transport helicopter began its approach to Camp Meridian's landing zone, but Elena could hear the general coordinating with what sounded like a significant security force. Agent Phoenix, maintain your position. Security teams are inbound to secure the facility. Kane realized that her operation had been comprehensively compromised and that her options were rapidly disappearing. Phoenix, you don't understand the complexity of what's happening here. The intelligence I've been providing serves larger strategic objectives that you can't see from your limited perspective. Elena kept her eyes fixed on Kane while maintaining communication with General Blackwood. Major, I've documented every aspect of your coordination with external contacts. The evidence shows systematic betrayal of classified information and deliberate sabotage of training programs designed to protect national security. The facility's main doors burst open as General Blackwood's security team secured the building. Within minutes, the communication center was filled with military police and intelligence specialists who quickly took Kane and her associates into custody. General Blackwood herself arrived at the communication center 30 minutes later, her expression mixing professional assessment with personal curiosity as she studied Elena's tattoo and the evidence that had been transmitted during the crisis. Agent Phoenix, the general said, your cover assignment has uncovered what appears to be one of the most sophisticated internal security breaches in recent military history. Walk me through everything you've discovered. Elena spent the next 2 hours presenting the comprehensive evidence she had gathered over months of investigation. The data showed that Kane had been systematically modifying cyber warfare, training materials to emphasize rapid attack methodologies that would be ineffective against sophisticated adversaries. She had also been providing detailed intelligence about Camp Meridian's defensive capabilities to external contacts who appeared to be foreign intelligence services. The most disturbing aspect, Elena explained, is that Kane's modifications to the training program would have produced cyber warriors who were specifically ineffective against the kinds of threats that our adversaries actually pose. They would have been trained to fail when it mattered most. General Blackwood studied the evidence with the attention of someone who understood the strategic implications of Elena's discoveries. Agent Phoenix, your investigation has revealed threats that extend far beyond Camp Meridian. If similar compromises exist in other cyber warfare programs, our entire national cyber defense strategy could be fundamentally compromised. Elena nodded. General, that's why Kane's coordination with external contacts is so significant. They haven't just been stealing information. They've been shaping our training and defensive capabilities to create strategic vulnerabilities that they can exploit in future conflicts. The interrogation of Kane and her associates confirmed the scope of the conspiracy. Over several days of intensive questioning, it became clear that the compromise of Camp Meridian was part of a larger effort to undermine American cyber warfare capabilities by corrupting the training programs that produce defensive specialists. Elena's cover identity as a failed cyber warfare student had been perfect for the investigation because it allowed her to observe the program's flaws and compromises without triggering suspicion from the perpetrators. Her apparent inadequacy had been her greatest strength, allowing her to gather evidence that would have been impossible to obtain through conventional investigation methods. The transformation of Elena's status from washout to celebrated intelligence. Operatives sent shockwaves through Camp Meridian's entire command structure. Marcus Chun and the other cyber warfare students found themselves questioning everything they had learned about effective cyber operations when they discovered that the person they had mocked as professor was actually one of the military's most experienced cyber intelligence specialists. General Blackwood implemented immediate changes to the cyber warfare program, replacing Kane's rapid attack methodology with training protocols that emphasized the kind of comprehensive analysis and patient investigation that Elena had demonstrated throughout her assignment. The future of cyber warfare belongs to operatives who understand systems deeply enough to protect them effectively, General Blackwood announced during the restructuring briefing. Speed without understanding is not just ineffective, it's dangerous. Elena found herself appointed as the new director of cyber warfare training, tasked with developing programs that would produce specialists capable of defending against sophisticated adversaries who understood that the most effective attacks were patient, subtle, and designed to exploit defenders who prioritized rapid response over comprehensive understanding. Marcus Chun was among the first to request transfer into Elena's new training program, his previous arrogance replaced by genuine respect for methodologies he had once dismissed as outdated. Agent Phoenix, he said during one of their first meetings, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond anything I said during the program. You were teaching us lessons we were too proud to learn. Elena smiled as she reviewed Marcus's application. For advanced training, Marcus, pride isn't the enemy. The enemy is thinking that any single approach has all the answers. The best cyber warriors understand when to move fast and when to move carefully. The tattoo that had revealed Elena's true identity became a symbol throughout the restructured program, representing the importance of understanding systems and threats comprehensively rather than simply responding to them quickly. Students learned that effective cyber warfare required the patience to analyze, the precision to act correctly, and the wisdom to know the difference. Chief Santos was promoted to deputy director of the new program, her years of patient system analysis finally receiving the recognition they deserved. "Elena," she said during one of their planning sessions, "you've done something I never thought possible. You've proven that being different isn't a weakness when you're right about what matters." Elena stood in the same cyber operations center where she had once been dismissed as inadequate, but now it buzzed with students learning methodologies that emphasized understanding over speed, precision over aggression, and comprehensive analysis over rapid response. The woman they had called Professor had indeed been teaching lessons that none of them were ready to learn. But now, with the evidence of what happened when those lessons were ignored, Elena's approach to cyber warfare was shaping the next generation of defenders who would protect American interests in an increasingly complex digital battlefield. Elena's journal, once filled with observations that seemed too slow and careful for modern warfare, became the foundation for training protocols that would be implemented across military cyber programs nationwide. The methodical approach that had marked her as different had become the standard for excellence. As she reviewed reports from recent graduates who were successfully detecting and countering sophisticated cyber threats using the patience and precision she had taught them, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her from apparent failure to transformational success. Sometimes the most important victories belong to those who were willing to be misunderstood in service of being correct when it mattered most. And sometimes the people everyone overlooked were exactly the people everyone needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.